Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today we're going to be talking about how to overcome language learning plateaus. Let's get started. So this is something that everybody is going to face as they go on their language learning adventure. Everybody faces this. It's present in both the beginner, the intermediate, and advanced stages, and it's just kind of part of the process. And I think that before we even really try to go and understand how to solve and get over this plateau, it's really important to understand kind of the plateau in general. So, one of the big reasons why language learning has so many plateaus throughout the entire process is just because it's very hard to kind of measure progress. And it's probably even worse if you don't even track your own progress. But, that being said, it's very hard to measure results. So, how many words do you really know? How good are you at speaking? A lot of it is very subjective. One day we feel like we're making progress, the other day we feel like we're going backwards. And so this kind of makes it very hard to, gauge progress, and then thus we kind of get into these plateau stages. And what's important to remember too is that I think that, being in that plateau is probably the most dangerous for someone that's a beginner or in the intermediate phase, because as a beginner you're probably more likely to quit, or as an intermediate person maybe you're going to spend less and less time learning the language and then you'll end up quitting. Right at the advanced level, you've kind of invested a lot of time, you have a lot more experience, so you're kind of more okay with that plateau, but maybe you still want to get over that. So with that being said, let's talk about solutions. So how do we get over the language learning plateau? Well, the first thing I would suggest really is basically discipline. And it's kind of funny, but being very consistent in your study routine is probably the best way to get over these plateaus in language learning. So really the two core principles, in my opinion, for making progress in language learning is staying motivated, being motivated, and being consistent with your practice or learning. And really we want to be consistent with that practice component. So if you aren't already, try to be very consistent with learning a language on a daily basis, weekly, whatever your schedule allows it. Now, this is kind of important because if you're in this plateau, chances are maybe you've started to slow down. You've gotten a little bit lazy with learning a language. This is the time to say, what, I'm going to be very disciplined and I'm going to do this every single day, even though I just feel like I'm not making progress. Maybe you've quit altogether. Now is the time to get back to that discipline, because ultimately you're making progress under the hood. You might not see it because, as I said, a lot of language learning progress is just very hard to measure. You're making progress the more time you spend. So if we're being at least consistent with studying, even though we don't feel it, that's ultimately what's going to help us to get over that plateau. So that's the first thing. Stay disciplined, be consistent with your routine, or get back on it if you've fallen off. So number one, that's pretty key. Second thing is try mixing things up. This is something that I think a lot of people might this is a trap they might fall into, where they're really just doing the same thing over and over and over again. You might see this with people that just constantly use flashcards, or are really hammered in on grammar, or maybe some of the beginner books. Try mixing things up, because sometimes whatever you're doing right now, that might have kind of gotten you to this level, and really it's not helping you as much as maybe some sort of other method or strategy could do. So if you're really just hyper focused on learning new vocabulary words with flashcards, try incorporating some reading into the mix, or some more listening. Mix up your routine, because that newness is not only going to make things a little bit more motivating for you, it's going to be fresh, but that's going to help the learning process in general. And with that being said as well, not only just try to mix up things in your study routine, but try to mix it up with some things that you enjoy, even if maybe the amount of progress that you're making is not that great. So try to do the things that you might enjoy in the language. Try to watch a movie in the foreign language on Netflix, or try to play a video game. Even if you're at that beginner stage and you're probably not going to get maybe a lot out of it compared to someone that's a little bit more advanced level, a lot of that's going to do a lot of things underneath the hood. It's going to keep you motivated. It's going to kind of mix things up, and I think it's a great way to kind of get over that plateau. So That's another key way to get over it. And then I think the last thing I would just mention is look at what you're doing in terms of strategy and methods. Once again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, but, be very, critical about, okay, well, what do I actually have a plateau in? Is it, I feel like I'm not making progress with speaking? Is it in general? If we can identify where we feel like we're in a plateau, then we can kind of concentrate efforts. So let's say we feel like we're not making progress speaking. Well, maybe then the key component there is to put more time into speaking, or find different new ways to kind of improve speaking. Hyper focus on that thing that we need that assistance with. Well, let's say you feel like you have a plateau in general. It's not just speaking, it's everything. Well, that's a kind of good time to look at the methods that we're looking at. Are the things that I'm doing really helping me? Am I acquiring new words? Am I really making progress? This might be a good time to look at, maybe my method of study is not very effective, and I should try to be incorporating new things in my language learning process. So, those new methods can really make a big difference in the end of the day. A lot of people are really doing a lot of things that aren't very effective, for their time. So just by changing a couple of little things, either that, whether that's just, doing more reading or more listening, can really make a big difference in the end of the day. So that's what I had. Remember, I think ultimately in the end of the day, to overcome that language learning plateau, be consistent, and just, trust in that process, because if you're putting in that time, there is this kind of concept of momentum. Eventually, you are going to get over it. You are acquiring things in the background. You're going to get better. So trust in that process, even though you don't, you might not feel it in the moment. And, realize that it's part of, kind of the process of learning a language, right? It's just filled with all of these plateaus. So, take that into consideration. Remember that, trust in the process, stay diligent, and you will overcome that and make progress. This has been Matt. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.